Are you someone who suffers with cramps every time your period arrives? Maybe they're dull and achy. Maybe they're sharp and stabby. Maybe they're so severe that you find yourself calling out of work for the first couple days of your period. Any way you look at it, pain to that level is not normal, nor should it be normalized. Have you considered, perhaps, that tampons might be part of the culprit behind why you're having such severe pain? Join me this week as we take a look at how tampons can actually create period problems, namely cramping, and how a transition out of them could be one of the best decisions you make for your health. Hi, I'm Adrienne Irizarry. I'm an Eastern medicine practitioner who is passionate about women's health and helping women live their best lives. My goal is to put you in the driver's seat of your menstrual health, offering period solutions for a symptom-free life. Statements made in this program are for educational purposes only and not intended as a substitution for medical consultation or advice. We do not claim to diagnose, treat, or cure any diseases. This podcast is inclusive and welcomes all gender identities. The focus of the program is on biological function, and we will use the term women throughout, but it is referencing physiological and social challenges for biology, not identity. Come as you are, I am happy you're here and welcome all performances of identity. I hope you find something helpful in this show. Welcome back to another episode of the Reproductive Rebel podcast. Today we're going to talk about tampons. So if you are a tampons user, this is not to throw shade or shame. This episode is merely to give you the 411 that you likely haven't had before regarding tampons, using tampons, and what they do to your body. So if you have taken my period care course, you already have a little bit of insight into this. If you haven't taken it, yes, I light things on fire. It's totally worth checking out. But tampons are designed to be a quick and easy, quote unquote, leak free way. And I'm using like words that you hear out in society, right? To manage your period. And one of the challenges with them is they actually prevent the true fit form and function of the period itself, which creates symptoms. So what do I mean by that? So if you remember at the beginning of season 2, I went through and broke down the different phases of the cycle very early on in that little mini series. If you haven't had a chance to check it out, it's episodes 3 through 7 in season 2. But I break down what's going on inside of your body in each of the phases of your cycle. So use that as a reference point. But just as a quick refresher, your period or your bleed is supposed to flush out things. Okay. You develop a blood-rich endometrial lining in preparation for ovulation. If fertilization does not take place, your body has to release that lining and start again with a clean slate for the new month with the anticipation of getting pregnant. Whether that's your social goal or not, this is biologically what your body tries to do every single month when you are not using birth control and you are allowing the full and healthy expression of your hormones. Okay. So if we understand that the period is actually flushing or releasing this lining, it starts to make sense why tampons are not your friend. Okay. So tampons are a plug product. By their very nature, if you look at them, the way you put them in, everything about them, they are a plug product. So what they do is they absorb the flushing mechanism, which is the blood. The period uses blood to create momentum and to push this lining that your body is shedding that isn't needed because a pregnancy didn't result out. Okay. So, if that is the whole purpose of the period, when you stick an object in the way of that release, that down and out energy that you're supposed to have, over time it starts to create problems. So you have a tiny hole in your cervix that the blood and the unused endometrial lining flow out through. It is a down and out energy. This is also why people can get period cramps when they try to be intimate with penis and vagina sex during their period, because the energy is going in the opposite direction. And in some ways, the partner is acting kind of like a plug and not allowing the down and out flow that is supposed to occur during that time frame. So even though there are some women who feel more primal during that time frame, and a lot of times that has to do with the fact that once the blood starts flowing, there's less stagnation in the body, and the body feels more like they're open emotionally and energetically to engaging and being intimate with their partner. Not everybody feels that way, but some women do. So if you think about that concept, okay, the tampon acts like a roadblock. It goes up and in, and it sits right at the doorway where everything is supposed to come out. So the tampon only absorbs the flushing mechanism, like I said before. It is actually not taking care of all of the things that are coming out during your period. Sometimes women will notice that they'll have like a collection of stuff on the top of their tampon when they pull it out. And that's part of the reason why. Okay. So, very, very early on in my practice, I started making this connection that women who had severe period cramps, one of the first questions that I had to ask them was, do you use tampons? And most of the time, the answer was yes. One, because they're convenient. Two, because if you get caught in a bathroom, usually that's what's in the dispenser, right? They're easy to slip into a pocket. They're easy to slip into a purse. The problem is they block the actual function of the period itself. If you use one once in a while, that's not going to be enough to create period cramps. What it is when it is used as part of the, like, let's call it flow management, right? Like, there are lots of women who do not feel comfortable with wetness in their pad, for example. So they use a tampon, or you can put a tampon in and then you can go swimming. I wouldn't recommend, unless it is heated water, going swimming on your period, but that's a story for another day. So, because of the flexibility that it gives you in terms of what you can wear for clothing and what you can wear for bathing suits and all of these kinds of things, they are a, I hate to call it hygiene product, but that's the terminology, hygiene product of choice. The reason why I can feel myself recoil when I call it a hygiene product is that kind of insinuates that our menses is dirty, and it's not. It is the most normal thing in the entire world. However, we live in a modern world, and in a lot of cases, free bleeding either isn't comfortable because it's kind of a foreign concept for a lot of people, or it just, they feel wet and then they don't like that feeling. I am one of those people. I don't like that wet feeling because I worry about odor. Even though there's none there, it's still, subconsciously in the back of my mind. So, this is where I tend to advocate for menstrual cups and menstrual discs with my clients. Now, there are some mixed schools of thought about this, because some will argue that there's still an up and in energy for these, and they're not completely wrong. The difference in my mind is that it sits like a catcher's mitt underneath the cervix, rather than being a solid object that's either up against or really darn close to being up against the cervix. So as this catcher's mitt style, it allows for the free flow and free passage of the blood and the endometrial lining so that a proper shedding can take place. I remember when I first made a transition between tampons and menstrual cups and discs, it was like night and day different. I had horrible, severe period cramps prior to that point. And I made the transition originally, and I look back at it and I go, "Oh god, Adrian." I made the change originally because I was boxing and kickboxing and would train during my period. So, for any of you who've followed me for a little while, you're like, "Oh, yeah, that's not a great decision, Adrian." I look back at it now and I go, "No wonder I was so tired." However, this is how I came to start using menstrual cups because as the only woman or maybe one of 2 that were training, right? Because at least in the area that I was in there, you didn't find a lot of female kickboxers or boxers. So I didn't want to have the embarrassing breakthrough. I had had that happen with a tampon. I hauled off to kick a heavy bag one day and I could feel that I had bled through my tampon. I was into the pad underneath it and I needed to go to the bathroom right then. That level of bleeding also indicates that I shouldn't have been training during my period, but I digress. So I made the switch originally because of the leak-free protection that the cup gave me. And then I started noticing that each period, my cramps were less severe. The more I used the cup, the less I had issues with period cramps. And I was totally blown away by this. Well, then as I started training in the work that I do now, I realized just why this occurs. And it's because I was no longer blocking the exit. Because if you think about it, the body only has 2 tools in order to release this endometrial lining. The primary mechanism is the blood. It flushes this away, right? The other is cramping, where the uterus contracts because it goes, "Well, geez, the blood's not working and I don't have any other tools available, so I'm gonna use muscle contraction to try to get this to go away." So, when you no longer block the exit, the body doesn't need to rely on that muscle cramping in order to move things forward. So I highly recommend if you are somebody who really struggles with period cramps, if you use a tampon, I would recommend you take a look at that. Okay. Again, this episode is not shaming, it's not to make you feel bad about being a tampon user. God knows I used tampons for years before I figured out that this was part of my problem. So I get it. Okay. But the other thing that I will often hear from clients when I make this suggestion is, "Oh, it's okay. I use organic tampons." Okay, so let's break this down. You're using an organic product. That's great. You've lowered your chemical load, right? Because the cells inside your vaginal canal are some of the most porous of the entire body, meaning that they absorb things really well. It's great if you're using a progesterone vaginal suppository to help with a potential miscarriage risk, for example. You want that to be super bioavailable for you. But in this particular case, it also makes you a sponge for all of the chemicals that you find in tampons that have synthetic components in them. So that part's not really so great. So, yes, organic tampons help to lower your overall chemical load and exposure. That's fantastic. However, there are a couple of things to note. Number one, organic tampons shed. Okay. So, like I mentioned, the period care course that I have available online or in the menstrual cup course too. I have two. I have one about proper period care and one about how to use menstrual cups and discs. In the one about menstrual cups and discs, I light tampons on fire so that you can see how they function, right? So, like the organic one, like burned. right? Which is what you'd expect. There's no other chemicals that will create a different reaction in it. The challenge is if you put something like that in water and you shake the water around, so put an organic tampon, if you don't believe me, put an organic tampon in water and shake the cup around a little bit. You'll see that not only it expands, but it starts to shed. It has these like white floaties, that little fibers that end up in the water itself, and the water starts to get cloudy. So if it does that in water, just think about what it does inside of your body. So every time you pull that out, you're leaving some of those fibers behind, especially for people who pull one tampon out and put another one in. You're essentially leaving some of those fibers in there. I have seen clients end up with an infection after their period. And once they made the transition from using organic tampons, there was no longer this stuff left behind and they stopped having infections. So, food for thought. Okay. The other reason I light them on fire is because I want you to see that synthetic tampons smolder. They don't burn, they smolder because just like clothes that have synthetic fibers in them, they melt. Okay. So just think about that is the chemical makeup of what it is that you're putting inside of your body. All right. So if you are one of those people who's made a ton of changes, like in your diet and your lifestyle, and let's say you're trying to get pregnant and all of those kinds of things, using synthetic tampons from a lot of your major manufacturers is kind of going to tip the scale a little bit. You're putting things in your body in a very bioavailable place that are going to work against, okay? Because we already have so many endocrine disruptors in our life between the environment and the food and packaging for food, and like the list goes on, right? We already have a ton of stuff like that that our body deals with on a daily basis. Why add one more thing in a place in your body that your body's going to absorb it faster than it's going to absorb it anywhere else?
I'm going to pause this incredible episode to share an opportunity for you to join me as a reproductive rebel. As you know, I'm a holistic women's health practitioner who practices with a focus in East Asian medicine. I truly am one of a kind in the way that I practice, and that is a part of what makes me a rebel. I am here to disrupt a healthcare model for women and provide natural and effective solutions for all phases in a woman's life. Do you feel called to make a difference in women's health? Whether you are already a practitioner working in this space, wishing to add to your toolkit, or you are just a passionate rebel with a calling to make a difference for others, as I was at the start of my career in this field, the Holistic Women's Health Practitioner Program is open for enrollment. I am looking for passionate, committed, and heart centered people who desire to make a difference in the women's health space and desire to make it a place where women feel seen and heard, where their needs and concerns aren't gaslit, but really taken seriously and met with compassion and education to help them reach their goals. Does this sound like you? If so, please check out the program link in the show notes and schedule a one-on-one talk with me, or join a free information session. Or if you know that without a doubt this is where you want to go, enroll and get started today. Together, we will make a difference for the future of women's healthcare. I can't wait for you to join me.
So, just again, food for thought. So, when you make the transition from a tampon to a menstrual cup, you eliminate some of what's left behind, you reduce your exposure to some of the chemical load, and it's reusable. It saves you money. It saves things that go into the landfill. You know that if the toilet gets backed up at work, that you're not one of the people that contributed to it, right? Because some toilets you can't flush tampons. And I don't know about you, but it's kind of an experience when you're in work clothes in the bathroom and then you're trying to wrap that thing and get it into the sanitary napkin bin, right? And sometimes they don't even provide you the bin. You have to walk across the bathroom with it. So Menstrual cups give you a nice, easy, reusable way to manage your flow and being able to keep yourself comfortable during your period, both from a cramps perspective as well as from a flow management perspective. Because the other piece of tampons is they actually don't give you a true picture of how much you're actually bleeding. There was something released not all that long ago. For many of my clients, they saw reels about this and they sent them to me, and it completely blew their mind that up until now, sanitary products geared towards women's hygiene and, AKA management of your period, have not been tested with actual menstrual blood. We'll let that sink in for a second. Up until 2023, that blue liquid you see on TV when they pour it into a tampon or a menstrual pad is the caliber of what they've been using for fluid to actually test the efficacy of menstrual products. That's insane because the viscosity of blood is different. There's a whole long history behind that. Maybe I will do an episode on that at some point. It's one of those things that really gets me angry because it just feeds that narrative that your period is dirty, that blood is dirty, that menses and being a woman is dirty, and none of those things are true. So the beauty of a menstrual cup is you actually get a sense of how much you're bleeding. I have people who come in and they're like, yes, my period is super heavy. I'm changing a super plus tampon every hour to hour and a half. I'm bleeding through it. It's going into a pad. It's so much blood. Well, if the tampon isn't fully absorbing it, it might look like it on the outside, but it might not actually be completely absorbing everything. You might be bleeding around it. A menstrual cup is going to give you a much better idea because even a super plus tampon, the biggest one out there on the market, which, by the way, that little thing called TSS, that bacterial infection that you can get as a result of using larger and larger size tampons, that's a very real, very deadly thing. And if you're not changing it often enough, that could land you in the hospital or worse. So those risks go down using a menstrual cup. And if you're bleeding heavy like that, a menstrual cup, like I said, gives you a really great idea, a physical picture of how much blood you're actually losing. Because most menstrual cups will hold up to 30 milliliters of fluid. That is significantly more than the highest tampon. Okay. So if you're overflowing a cup every couple of hours, yes, you're losing way too much because you're not supposed to lose more than approximately 80 milliliters of fluid through the entire bleed. Okay, so if you're breaching the banks of your cup and you're overflowing that every 2 hours or less, yes, you have a very heavy flow. But for most of my clients, they are totally shocked when they stop using the Super Plus tampon, they start using a menstrual cup and realize that they can get 4 to 6 hours with a menstrual cup before they have to empty it on their heaviest day. That is a much truer measure of what your body is actually losing. And it helps give you more data to go into a conversation with a provider, whether it's a holistic provider or an allopathic provider, it doesn't matter. You now have a much more tangible way of measuring what the flow rate is in your body. I see in period panties and tampons and all these things, like they measure flow rate by the number of tampons you go through. You'll see it in the literature all over the place. Now that I've mentioned it, you're going to look at different things and go, why is the period panning company measuring it by tampons worth? Right? It's because tampons are so prevalent in terms of their usage. And it's because of their convenience. There are people that don't like to use period panties because they have to bring more than one pair to work, and then you have to rinse them and put them in a wet bag, and there's just a lot of work, right? This is why I'm such a big advocate for a menstrual cup, because you can go to work with it, you can travel with it. It will give you a longer period of time before you have to empty it, and you can wear it safely up to 12 hours with no risk of TSS or any other kind of infection, okay? So, as long as you're caring for it and cleaning it properly, I probably should include that. So, these can be an incredible ally for you, and they are truly magical in terms of reducing period discomfort. I know as I say that, for some people, you're like, "Mm-mm, not sticking my fingers in there," or, "Mm-mm, those are totally daunting, and I am not sure I wanna undertake that." That's the whole reason, actually, that I created the menstrual cup course that exists on my website, because I had so many questions for so many years by people who were curious, but they didn't have a friend that used one, so they didn't feel like they had anyone that they could ask. And so they would ask me, and I found that I was having the conversation over and over and over again. So I created a course and visuals and explanations, and it covers all kinds of things like, how do I deal with it in a public bathroom? That is a really big concern. If you're at work, what do I do with this thing? How do I keep it clean? How can I be discreet about this is what I'm doing right now, right? So that is covered. How to insert, the different ways to fold it to get it inserted. How do you know that it's in there properly? And so much more, because these are all questions that new users have. Now, from the time I created that course till now, there's so many more products on the market. They are getting really, really intelligent and savvy. I am not endorsed or supported by Salt, but I feel like they deserve a shout out, because they have actually not only taken into consideration that different bodies need different sizes, and they've given you a really great guide to figure out, like, maybe where to get started, which didn't exist years and years ago when I first did this. I had a couple of trial and errors there because I didn't know anybody who used them either, right? The whole reason I created this resource. So, Salt also has different firmnesses of silicone, which is lovely, because for people who might get a little more inflamed around their period, they might feel more comfortable in a softer silicone. When people are first starting to use these, I recommend something that's a little bit firmer because it springs open a lot more easily. And it helps you get an idea of, is it open? Is it closed? It holds its shape pretty well. Like, it just makes it easier as you're getting used to using them. But the whole point of talking about this is that you do have options outside of using a tampon that will give you the same leak-free protection. You can use them with an IUD, you can use them no matter what. And then it also, taking it a step further, if you're comfortable and get comfortable with a menstrual cup, it opens the door for natural non-hormonal contraception options like a Kaya diaphragm. Again, I'm not endorsed by them. I am merely putting out resources and tools that I have found over the years as a practitioner that work brilliantly, that are really easy for my clients to use and feel comfortable with, and feel like they're in control of all of the concert of things that are happening inside of their body. So if you're looking for a non-hormonal contraceptive option, Kaya can be a really great ally, but the comfort putting that in and taking that out isn't that much different than a menstrual cup. So I invite you to take a hard look at what you're using for products to care for yourself during your bleeding days. Tampons are widely popular. This episode's probably going to get some people who don't like me, and that's okay because I want you to be aware when you're making the choice to use one that it very likely is a big culprit. It might not be the only thing, but it likely is a culprit in why you are experiencing the cramping that you're experiencing. Because as you use them over time, you continually block the exit of everything that needs to pass. So the body will start to cramp because it goes, oh, I recognize that there's something in here that doesn't belong in here and I need to get it out. And the thing is because our bodies are wicked brilliant, it does all that it can. Sometimes it'll try cramping before there's blood to help with the flushing. Sometimes they happen together in concert. But the body's brilliant and it knows what isn't supposed to be there and it tries to do something about it. So help your body out. I would really invite you to at least give it a try and see if there are other hygiene products that are going to support a healthier flow so that you are less symptomatic. There is nothing worse than trying to go bring your kids to soccer practice and get dinner done and work a full day and all of these things when there is this nagging pain that is dominating your ability to function, let alone the people who it gets so bad they are vomiting by the toilet or they're curled into the fetal position praying for death. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, there are clients that come to me that are like, I wish for death when my period comes for the first 2 to 3 days because the pain is so severe. I can't get out of bed. I can't move. I have to call out of work every month. Like, this is a big problem. So your tampon might be a big part of that problem. So just take a look at it. If you feel like the idea of a menstrual cup, because again, I'm staying in that focal point of leak-free protection, right? I mean, there's tons of other products out there, period panties, different kinds of pads. There's some great manufacturers that are putting out organic products that are lower chemical load. Like, you have lots of options. But if we're staying focused on the leak-free protection that tampons provide, we are really fortunate to have the ability to use a menstrual cup because it provides that, but with less infection risk, less toxicity risk, reusability, and the convenience of leak-free protection, all while reducing our cramps.
Thank you for joining me for another episode of Reproductive Rebel. Reproductive Rebel is recorded by certified peri-steam hydrotherapist and acutonics practitioner, herbalist, and Chinese nutritional therapist Adrienne Irizarry of Moon Essence LLC. If you are interested in setting up an appointment for one-on-one support, ordering from our store, or checking out our course offerings, visit our website at moonessence.life. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter and get insider information on upcoming events and offerings. Join the conversation. Like and follow us at Moon Essence Me on Instagram, Facebook, or LinkedIn. Your voices make this program possible. Thank you all for your continued support.